Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's appearance at next week's G7 summit in Evian is part of a longer trip to France, his second in 2 years. It begins this Saturday in Nice, where he'll be attending an Indian startup event. He'll also be at the Vivatech summit in Paris next week. Modi and French President Emmanuel Macron have been deepening their ties, notably when it comes to defense and technology. Meeting in Mumbai earlier this year, they elevated their relationship to a special global strategic partnership. Well, for more, we can bring in Amalendu Misra, a professor of international politics at Lancaster University. Good morning, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Very good morning to you, Alison. Welcome from Lancaster.
Could you perhaps start by explaining what's driving this intensified collaboration between India and France? When did it start?
Well, let me use a very catchphrase, and I would imagine this is something like entente cordiale between France and India. Both trust each other. The relationship is based on intense trust between New Delhi and Paris. Both see each other as equals. And this is something great for India because for decades or for generations, India has been considered as a kind of third world power. And France is only one of those nations which treats India as an equal. And that is something for India. And this is kind of demonstrated in the fact that between 2014 and 2026, we're talking about 12 years, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has visited France almost 7 times. President Macron has been to India not as many as 7 times, but 3-4 times, if I'm not mistaken. So one is trust. The second tier of the relationship is based on autonomy. Both France and India see the global order differently from others. They don't want to be dominated by United States. They both would like to see a rules-based international order where there is multilateralism. And that is where their common perception, foreign policy perceptions converge. And the third one is in the domain of technology. India has been sort of shunned by the West for quite a long period of time when it comes to technology transfer, when it comes to the transfer of defense procurement and so on and so forth. So that's where France has played a massive role. Both Paris and New Delhi signed a defense cooperation agreement way back in 1998. So that has kind of grown from leaps and bounds over the years and so on and so forth. India is one of the, France is India's second biggest arms provider when it comes to fighter jets, when it comes to submarines, when it comes to helicopters. So the list can go on.
Yeah, can you kind of break it down for us a bit more concretely? Like, what does each country get from the other one?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't want to sort of say everything is based on defense cooperation. It is multi-layered. So defense is one aspect of it. The second one has to do with technology transfer, especially in the domain of artificial intelligence. President Emmanuel Macron was in India way back in February, where both India and France sort of engaged in this specific emerging technologies so far as artificial intelligence is concerned. And that leads to something to do with critical minerals, which we all know drives the wheel of international system at the moment, and both see eye to eye with each other on that particular front. The third one is energy. France has been one of India's key partners when it comes to civil military and nuclear technologies, and India is developing a nuclear reactor in the western state of Maharashtra, which France is helping. And then they also have been looking into renewable energy. India, France work in a big way in terms of solar energy. The other one that I would like to highlight is the people's people contract. And I think India, France have, despite the effects of Cold War politics in the past, share a relationship that is not hampered by colonialism, as was the case of United Kingdom, or kind of a big power relationship as with the United States. As I said a little earlier, it's based on mutual trust, autonomy, respect for each other. And France has been one of those key countries that has opened up its doors for India in terms of cultural transfer, especially in the context of students going to study in France. And I understand there will be some 30,000 Indian students by 2030 will be studying in France and gaining this kind of know-how in terms of taking India on a new path towards Atmanirbhar India, as Prime Minister Modi calls it, self-sufficient India in terms of technology.
And as we heard in our report earlier, Modi is also due to meet with Donald Trump, the U.S. president, on the sidelines of the G7. That comes after the U.S. strike that killed 3 Indian sailors. There's also been tension between the two over tariffs. Can you tell us what we can expect perhaps from that meeting?
Well, I mean, they're kind of going through a kind of hot and cold phase. At one point, the United States was India's key partners in terms of strategy, in terms of trade, and so on and so forth. But that bonhomie somehow sort of died in the Trump 2 presidency, especially when United States started sort of slapping all these massive tariffs on India, because India was supposedly dumping all the cheap goods, and United States was not getting a good bargain. So that is a kind of thorn in their US-India relationship. And this will be a good opportunity for both of them to sort of address some of those tensions in a kind of neutral ground, such as in France. And since it has been arranged for a bilateral meeting, both sort of praise each other. I mean, both Modi and Trump are good pals, and sort of only recently, Trump had sort of congratulated Modi for Modi being in power for the last 12 years. It is unthinkable in the current climate, a democratically elected prime minister doing that. So there'll be a lot to sort of watch out for, especially in terms of the bilateral talk that India is hoping to have with President Trump in France. So there are tensions, of course. I mean, your previous report talked about United States firing all these shots and getting 3 Indian sailors killed. But this is something that both would like to overlook and move in the direction of something much more concrete when it comes to global order, strategy, trade, tariffs, and so on and so forth.
All right, we'll be keeping an eye on Modi in the coming days. Amalendu Misra, thank you again so much for taking the time today. That's Amalendu Misra, Professor of International Politics at Lancaster University.
Thank you so much, Alison. Have a good day.